Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Gonna do another behind the build video. This one is for a 2012 to 2017 Hyundai Veloster. And this particular set is actually going to someone over at Dress Up Bolts. So we were able to incorporate some dress up bolts inside the lights. This is the second time I've actually done this on a set of lights. It's kind of cool, you know, working outside of the box, adding something different. But the main focus on this one here, not so much the little artwork and stuff, but behind the build itself. So this is another good example of just the flexibility of what you can do with the rigid strips. You know, being that they are not flexible, a lot of people kind of think, oh, well, then I can only do straight stuff, I can only do certain things with it. Really important factor, the reason why they are rigid, is the heat. It's the heat dissipation. It's the thing that makes them last, makes them a better quality than what you're going to get in a flexible strip. We also have the components that are required for UCS, and they have to be mounted on the back of the strip. So unfortunately, we really can't get away from rigid with the UCS lineup. And if you're comparing the rigid to the semi-rigid, the somewhat flexible version of the UCS that we have, if you were to buy both and put them side by side, the rigid are slightly brighter. You just have that extra heat dissipation with the rigid version, which just makes them brighter. So it's definitely something to consider if you do look to compare the two. But this should show a little bit of the flexibility of what the rigid can do. Now granted, there is a lot of soldering on here. I'll try to get a close-up here. But you can see I used 8mm rigid in the channel there. And basically had to cut like each section for most of it, solder it back together to create the shape that I needed. But in the end, the results are what I want for this headlight, you know. Yeah, it's a little bit extra work, but the outcome is far better than I would ever get with a SK variant LED. Beyond that, we did also do 5mm LEDs down here in the bottom, replacing the LEDs that were in there from the factory. And now this is a great example of where like extra tools in the shop come in handy. I really like resin printers. I've had FDM printer for probably like 4 years. I think I started getting into them and bought one and played with it. You know, it was really cool being able to create your own stuff, print them out, find stuff online and print it out. But the FDM for smaller parts or just a clean look to it, you know, you usually have print lines and really small stuff. It's usually not perfect. I really like what the resin printers can do when it comes to that. So it's kind of hard to see here, but I'll show you kind of how I got those in there, because they're actually it's a little bit bigger than 5mm. So getting them to fit flushly, I would have had to do glue or something like that to make them fit. But with the resin printer, I was able to do that a different direction. So I did use the 5mm RGB-W variant that we have on the site. This is based on the SK6812 RGB-W chipset. The same IC is used in here, but with a 5mm layout LED setup. So there are actually 4 diodes in there. Once again, we are the only ones selling this currently. It was quite a feat to get 4 in there, and they are all tested in the factory, but the failure rate's a little bit higher on them in the factory. So like the manufacturing process, I guess, to get the 4 diodes in there, you know, sometimes they're not centered quite right and you got to toss the LEDs. So obviously they're all tested before they ship, but they have been quite a few in production that just don't sit quite right because you're having to fit 4 diodes in there instead of the normal 3 of the RGB, and it's very tight in there. So that's one of the reasons why the cost is a good bit higher on these versus the RGB. Still very reliable. I've not had a single one fail on me personally. Haven't really heard of a whole lot of issues short of people with their first time building with them, you know, the normal woes of having to basically build your own PCB. But these are pretty cool, and this is something that I actually developed myself. Really simple circuit, and this is the first batch I got them in. I've been playing with them for a couple months now, and I'm gonna try to get an official batch and get it on the site. But this is something I developed, which is a very small PCB where the LED itself can slide in through the 4 holes, just like that. And then you can solder the LED to it and cut the pins. And then you've got solder pads on there for your inputs and outputs. And it just converts the 5mm into something more like what the headliner LEDs are. Very similar to that setup, but in this case, being that I don't have those yet for the RGBW, these come in pretty handy to do it that way. And cost-wise, because you're doing the work yourself, it's a lot more cost-effective. So if you only need a couple of them, this is going to be the better way to go, RGB, RGBW. Granted, you know, if you're looking for ease and you're using RGB for like taillights or something, I would personally still go with the pre-wired, but definitely preference. In this case, like I said, I don't have the RGBW in the pre-wired, so that is how I'm doing that. And then, as I mentioned with the resin printer, I actually created these spacers. Just measured, designed in Tinkercad, I believe. Really easy, free software. It works pretty good. And it just slides right over top of the LED and it fits right in. Now, I mean, I don't have these on the site. You know, if somebody really, you know, if you're doing a Veloster and you want to use the 5mm LEDs and you want this setup, you know, I can send you the file. If you have a resin printer, you can print them. FDM is going to struggle to print something this small and this accurate. So I would definitely recommend that you print it with a resin, not an FDM. But by all means, you want to give your FDM printer a go and see how it works, go for it. But I don't know you're going to get good results. But yeah, you can definitely try it out. I do have the file, so, you know, hit me up if you're doing a Veloster and you want to get that file. But it's just an example of something that you can do, adding extra tools to your shop and to your business. FDM printers. I actually just picked up a 9.25 inch 6K FDM printer around Christmas. They were doing a deal. FlashForge was for like $250. That's not a huge investment to be able to do, you know, to add that option to your builds and things that you're doing, to be able to print little pieces that might make everything come together better. These just made it so that it fits perfectly into that channel there and lines up the LEDs perfectly, so I don't have to worry about trying to glue them in or fill the gaps somehow and make them line up. I mean, as you can see, I didn't have to do much at all material added, but it was enough that like the whole LED was falling through if I didn't do that. So very, very helpful to be able to do that. So definitely consider a nice FDM is good. I definitely prefer resins, but please keep in mind if you go with a resin, resin printers are notoriously smaller than FDM printers in general. So, you know, you're going to spend a little bit more for a bigger one, but, you know, a 9-inch can do a lot. And, you know, they can go up from there, even 13 inches and even bigger than that if you're willing to spend a little closer to $1,000. But beyond that, there was also, your basic halo here. As always, I do like to flush mount mine. I did use Gorilla Glue contact adhesive to secure everything in place. I do still use the CA glue to kind of tack weld things. It's basically just to put it where I want it so that it doesn't move. And it depends. I mean, the halo stayed where it needed to be, so I didn't have to worry about that. I just used Gorilla Glue. The 5mm LEDs, I did use it because the wiring in there is somewhat stiff because it is 18 gauge. So they were kind of trying to move around on me a little bit, so I did use a little bit of the CA glue to kind of tack weld them in, and then use the Gorilla Glue to just create a bond, a vibration-proof bond, and that's basically the difference between Gorilla Glue and CA. CA will break off with vibrations. You're on a car, it's not a great idea to just use CA. But the Gorilla Glue is awesome. So kind of the same deal on these. Actually, I don't think I used any CA glue on these strips. I was able to get them in right where I needed and just use some electrical tape to hold them in place. And then I used Gorilla Glue all over the solder pad contact points. Wherever I added solder and pins, I did them there. And then different spots around to keep it in place. I also did cut out the supports, so when you pull out the factory strips that are in here, there is cross supports to hold this all together. I cut those out so that the LEDs could shine through without anything obstructing them, and I did use the Gorilla Glue to also help shore that back up. It wasn't terribly flexible or anything, but you definitely don't want the lights flexing a ton on the car, so I went ahead and kind of dual purposed that Gorilla Glue. So not only does it hold the strip in place, but it also holds the light together in that sense. In this case, all of my 5-volt was in here, so I did put the inverter on the actual bezel itself there, and then I have a single 3-pin plug here. This is a 12-volt plug coming from the light. Beyond that, I do have my diffused acrylic here. This is laser cut, but you can hand cut acrylic in shapes like that, and then use a vinyl cutter to create almost like a stencil and paint over the stencil, remove the stencil, and you can get fancy shapes like that that kind of make your build stand out a little bit better. I definitely prefer the laser, but not everybody's got a laser or money for a laser. So for the longest time I was using vinyl and cutting by hand, and that will work fine, especially in a case where you're on the back side like that. Like, once again, Gorilla Glue to secure it in place. It is not going to go anywhere, and that works quite well for me. Didn't need to use the output on the halo, so I didn't worry about adding it, because this is just going to be the headlight. Moving on from there, you have the inside of the light itself, and for this one, you can see I did use UCS strips back there. I just used a epoxy, putty style epoxy, which is another thing that I do like to use. Now, it is strong. That stuff, that's like vibration free. If you use a moderate amount of it, like about the amount that you see there, it will hold, it will not let go. I'm very happy with that stuff. So I do use it in places where the Gorilla Glue might not quite have been as easy to work with in that area. And it also created a barrier between the reflective material, which normally you can strip that off really easily. I just didn't do it in this case because there just really wasn't a need for it. It wasn't really necessary to remove the chrome on that. You're not going to see it. It's behind the light and nothing electrical is touching it, so I just left it. And then I do have the 2.5-inch projector in here, along with a 3D printed bracket and the demon eye in there. You can see on the top. Coming soon, I do have plans to start cutting metal, so we will start getting into metal brackets. So if you have a headlight that you need to get a projector bracket for, and and maybe nobody has them, or you just want to get it all in one place, let me know. I don't have a huge library of brackets, but I'm definitely willing to work with you to expand that library. So if you can get me what I need to create a bracket for you, I definitely can, and those will be made out of metal here within the next month or so. I'll be able to do that. Beyond that, you got all the wiring in there and everything. I do try to keep everything contained within the light, and some customers are very concerned of any shaking noises, even though a little demon eye driver slapping against the bottom of the light isn't going to kill anybody. But it is a good idea to secure that in there in a way, and you can see I got zip ties all over and stuff secured in there to a way that everything in the light can move, and electrically everything is kind of contained in there so nothing can get pinched or anything like that. And then I've got a cable gland coming out the side here that all of my wires come out of. You can see my plug coming out the back side there. In the case of this light, I was able to tap into the DRL and the turn signals from within the light. This side only had the turn. I did the DRL and the turn on the other light. As well as breather patches. You can see the white areas there with the hole. This light I did 6, so I normally do 4. This is a big light. This thing almost didn't fit in the oven. It barely fit into my oven. And for those of you that have seen it, I do have quite a big oven, so that is saying something. These are quite large lights. So I figured with the extra size, it was a good idea to just add a couple extra vents. So I do have 6 on this one, and they are spaced once again across the light. You can see all 3 of them there in that picture, and then up top here there's another 3 that you can see there on top. Once again, spread around the light. You're trying to let the light breathe. You put them all right next to each other, you're not doing a heck of a lot. So that worked pretty good. Etched lens, like most of you guys are familiar with, and obviously everything is addressable. So I'll go ahead and put it together, hook it up, and just kind of show you the output and what we're dealing with. So here it is, all hooked up and together. And of course I'll be using my remote, same controller layout that I do, my little Pro controller here, with the remote itself. So I connect the power there, a little flash of blue, perfectly normal for UCS, and then turn on my show notes. And as you can see, as I said, the UCS, it's so much brighter than you're going to get out of the SK. So while it was a good bit of work to get the strips cut and put in place, I think there's somewhere around 30, just under 30 addresses for the little DRL tube here alone. So it was a fair amount of soldering, and by the end of it, if you're kind of new, you'll be significantly more experienced. But the end result is just so much better than what you're going to get with SK or anything that's a little bit more friendly to flexible. I would absolutely not use side emitting in these lights. The distance that the LEDs have to travel, the amount of DRL that they have to actually diffuse, you can see especially up here in the corner, it's quite a bit. You could maybe try to figure out a way to put some LEDs in there extra, but ideally you want to have them flowing in this direction the way that I did it on the inside there. It's also going to be way easier than trying to figure out a way to maybe cut it out or backlight it. Going to be a lot of work to try to get that. You could do it, and there's nothing wrong with putting in a little bit of extra work if you can. I just don't know that the outcome will be that great. So definitely do not recommend the side emitting, even though that may be the seemingly the easiest way to do these. I would definitely not recommend doing the side emitting on this. The SK 6812 5050s standard strips that we sell Alibaba sells, you see them all over the place, would not quite be enough as well. I mean, in a dark room, it won't look too bad, but obviously we want these to be seen outside in the sunlight on a sunny day, no problem, and the UCS is just going to get you there, whereas the SK is not. So definitely something to consider, and I would definitely not use anything WS or anything like that for these lights. But alright, so that should pretty much cover this build. It was a little bit more complex, a little bit more involved, so I figured I'd go ahead and cover it. I want to do a few more of these as I build more so complex builds, just to help you guys see, like, at least how I'm doing it. Because I get asked all the time, well, how do you do this? How do you do that? Oh, that looked amazing. How did you do that? Well, this is how I do it. Obviously, there's multiple ways to attack this stuff. There's multiple ways to do builds and retrofits, and I by no means have the perfect solution and the only option to do them. But, it's just another example of showing you the things that I've learned over the years and the outcome that I get with my process. So, there you go. Some of you guys may actually be able to see this car at some different shows and stuff. So you can actually see it in person, and now you actually know the behind the build, the actual way that it was designed. So definitely thank you for watching the video. If you have any questions, go ahead and put it in the comments or hit us up directly on Instagram or Facebook. And till the next video, make sure you subscribe, like, all that jazz, and check out nextlevelneo.com for all of your color flow and retrofitting needs. Thanks a lot, guys.